Okay, so for those on video, we're just noting there in verse 37 that our discussion previous class last night, that the three main categories of sin or doing wrong before God. You have chata, which is mentioned here, missing the mark. You have also a form of avon, that is to twist the target. So missing the target where you want to hit it is one category. Being in rebellion, saying I'm not going to do what the target says, that's transgression or pasha. And here, twisting the target, making it something different, is in the moral area, is iniquity, or here avon, or a form of it. Okay, going on.
From before your presence or your face, not to be blotted out.
Okay. Because
they provoke you in
leneged.
In sight of, or
yeah, the ones who are building, verse 38, and, or so, we repaired the wall, and
the wall was joined together.
What do we do with va-te? Share, Tikashare.
Was joined together, and the wall was bound together. It must be connecting to the final. And also that's afterwards. So we built the wall was joined together, and all the wall, as far as the half orchestrated.
Yeah, so many believe it's the idea of the wall is done up to a half. That idea.
The height of it?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you coming up with half of? It's from the
Katsir, half of her.
The heart of the people to do the work. So they were really motivated to get to this point.
And it was when Sanballat and Tobiah, the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites, heard that
restore. You also had a few of them verbs. You had the rebuilt, restored.
many times.
These are a couple of different.
And what did we say last night? By count, there was something like 33 or 34 of repair.
In regard to the wall of Jerusalem. And so then basically they're just summarizing that all the holes are plugged up.
Yeah, now the key thing there, that's why I kind of stressed it last night, it's not a wall up from bedrock, but here it tells you what?
That
they're closing up the gaps. So you may have, 100 yards where they didn't even attack it, but then a horrible area. That's got to be repaired. And then, okay?
But how much fighting was involved, though? Did they have to contend at that point with their enemy?
The Samaritans? Up to this point, it's just been threats. But the threats are starting to get, to escalate, and they figure, they're going to try something, do something, and so And you don't know, it doesn't say visibly they can see them. It's not like they're out on the Mount of Olives or on one of the ridges saying, hey, tonight we're going to attack your city or something like that. But so some of the Jews who live in Samaria are sending the messages down that they're hearing. And so it sounds like we better be ready or this could be a disaster.
They were finally, Sanballat and Tobiah and guys are finally getting to the point where we got to conspire something.
Yeah, because what they don't want is a fortified Jewish city. And if there's a fortified Jewish city, then it can only get stronger. And, wow, are they going to come up here and start taking their old territory back?
Right. Verse 2, they were upset and conspired. Verse 2, they all conspired together.
How about Cain? To fight against Jerusalem and to...
Not necessarily to see that.
And to basically work against it.
That's an interesting term.
What's the root? What's the root?
Is that a participle?
It's from the idea of it's from the idea of to cause concern, to cause trouble. So how is it to stir up problems against this project, against the city? That's the idea. But we prayed to our God, and we set a guard for them by day and by night.
Because of the presence.
Okay. Verse 4. And Judas said, what did he say?
Somebody's burden bearer strength has ceased.
Yeah, the strength of the workers
Has ceased or fallen.
and
There is, we heard this before, there's much rubble.
okay. We are not able to build on the wall. And
our enemies, adversaries,
what did they say?
they will not know and not see
until
we are in
and we will kill them, and we will
cause their work
to stop. Then it was
when the Jews came, well,
The ones who were living near them.
said to us,
That's what I just mentioned. It's these Jews who are passing the information down to Nehemiah.
and they share him, Isaiah, 6,
10.
and so those Jews came down a number of times.
Yeah, so it's using an idiomatic expression. They've told us 10 times or 100 times, that kind of idea.
From all the Macomb places, which you will return. Is that perfect?
Then I put.
We haven't had this term. The lower part.
Well, think of what's the central word there? Got, which can mean what? Under.
The underneath part, the lower part, from behind.
To the place.
From behind.
Belonging to the wall.
They got two ways of saying this term there. That has something to do with, and the sun must, is that, is there something glaring there on the wall? Like a really
Well, Saudi hate to be out in the open. We would say what? Outside, to be, with no cover, to be exposed. And I set the people with what with them? Their swords, bows. Notice here for bows, we had that used in our short story with Abraham with the rainbow. Kof, Sheen, and sure.
On the 10, you said it was idiomatic. Why would I know that?
Well, I mean, it could have been 10 times, but normally when people say stuff like that, it's to say they've told us many times. But it could be 10. I wouldn't argue against that. But normally in a culture, that's what we'll say. Yeah, he's told me 100 times. Well, he's not told you probably 100 times. Maybe it's been 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. But that's how we express the idea. Okay. 8. And to the you do not be afraid
of them, because the Lord,
in the presence of them, the great Lord, the awesome Lord, the great and awesome Lord, what?
And remember. Okay. So he's imperative. He's telling you to give them an imperative.
Notice the fronting there. What's the fronting? Don't be afraid because of them. The fronting, you have direct object.
The Lord.
So remember what? the great and awesome Lord. But the direct object to stress what is being said is set first. Focus on the great and awesome Lord.
And fight. Imperative.
Yeah,
For your brothers, your brethren,
your sons, your daughters, your wives, and
your houses.
your houses. And it came to be
That when our enemy who heard that he
now we need to stop for a minute, because has anybody picked up repetition?
when our enemies heard. Our enemies keep hearing.
Vayahi ka'asher shema sanvalet. Vayahi ka'asher shema sanvalet. Vayahi ka'ashar ba'u ha Yahudim. Vayahi ka'ashar shema orvenu. Verse 1, verse 6, verse 6, verse 15 all have the same phraseology. And so on your own, you'd start digging into it. What is the relationship? Is it larger? Is this a contained unit? But there's definitely, when you get up to verse 15, 4 pretty hefty statements that, other than perhaps a word, is the same. Okay, next verse.
When our enemies heard, verse 9, that what was made known to us, that God had brought to nothing, or that frustrated. The same thing they were trying to do to them, God had done for them. Their counsel. And then there's two ways of saying we returned, or
Then all of us return to the wall, each to his own job. And it came to be, from that day, here we have our term again that was used up there concerning half the wall. Kadzi,
the young men
half of the young men
contributed or made,
the ones who were doing work,
and the other half.
they were armed with what?
They had spears
Spears and shields and bows,
and whatever.
body armor, and don't forget the supervisors, the officers.
Were behind all of the house of Judah.
Good.
They were looking.
Verse 11.
That was imperfect. They were building
Yeah. At the wall,
the wall. They
the ones who were bearing,
you have two similar the burden, carrying the load, or I guess you had today they were bearing the burden.
bearing the building material,
With each, and did many
yeah, we're doing
work with one hand and
work with one, and
they had a weapon in it.
bearing or holding, grasping a weapon in the other. Verse 12.
Builders and the builders, men, the sword, tied upon a ship. And so they built there's a new fellow. And he that sounded, can you say, and he that sounded for that?
The one.
The one that sounded the shofar.
Yeah, shofar, circle shofar. So they have an alarm system. Very simply, everybody's out working. We have people who, so to speak, are working with one hand, got a sword on another. Everything's coordinated. But the big problem is, what if they attack the city at one place? Well, Nehemiah finds out about it, and that's the case. They must have had some type of, so many blasts of the shofar meant, come here, come there. But if you hear the shofar, it's a real emergency. You better come running, because if you just keep working, they're going to be in the city behind you, and we're going to be in a mess.
Verse 13 is that we already said all that before. This verse. And I said to the nobles, rulers, the rest of the people, that was in verse 8.
Yeah, great work is what?
Very much.
Very, yeah. And Pei Resh Dalet means to be apart.
Meaning like being part of a team type thing?
Apart.
Oh, apart from.
Apart from you.
It's separated. Are separated, and we are separated.
Upon the wall.
On the wall, far. And there are distances between these groups.
Yeah, so we may be working here. If the next section's okay, it may be a quarter mile away or 300 yards before you have another team working on the wall. So it's not like everybody's shoulder to shoulder. Some places it might be, but if we get in trouble here, we might start yelling and screaming, but if the wind's blowing the opposite direction, the next group may not even know we're in trouble.
So that underscores the shofar.
So that's what so he goes on to 14 to say that in place,
Yeah, probably. At the place
that which you hear the voice of the shofar or
sound of the trumpet.
There, gather.
Yeah, gather with us.
Our God will fight for us.
Our God will fight for us. Verse 15.
Could you say pressed in?
Press forward with the work.
Okay, so some held the weapons and some were working.
Had that before. How long do they work now?
From the rising.
Yeah, from the coming up of the, what is Shin Chet Resh?
The dawn.
Until the
Stars appear.
Yeah. So they're working probably, maybe 17, 18-hour days. Also, at that time, I said to the people,
Men and young men, lodge or stay. What's that term again? Is that the same term they use in Joshua? Lodge or stay?
Need to check that. Batok, in the midst, inside Jerusalem.
And as we become night, sort of like guard, and during the day they work. Well, some people, they probably had a revolving, some slept during the day while others stayed up all night guarding. So you had a continual working and guarding 24 hours.
Verse 17.
Is not I, nor my brother, nor my servants, nor the men, the guard, which follow me, none of us. Wow.
This got interesting.
Put off our clothes, except for the men that except that when they washed them.
Yeah, so the issue is here, no pajamas.
Where's the matter at?
You don't want to be caught with your pajamas on. So you are dressed, ready to fight all the time. Even when you went down to get Mayhew, water. Well,
Was there a walkway behind? I'm assuming it's a similar shaped wall where there's shooting slits and then was there a walkway behind when they tried to rebuild this, or did they just
you would imagine.
ladder up and put a temporary wall?
Well, you would imagine there would be a place to walk up there to move, so you could fight up and down the wall.
Yeah. Probably couldn't drive on it or ride on it, but you could walk.
Yeah, I mean some of the military cities, but
The original wall had a walkway. Full length.
Nehemiah chapter 5, what you can say is this. In Nehemiah 4, you have external danger, strife, i.e. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, and the Samaritans. And that will develop for a while. Nehemiah 5, the next chapter, you have internal strife. Maybe just take a couple notes. The internal strife comes up this way. Chapter 5, verses 1 to 13. Nehemiah 5, 1 to 13. It's an economic problem.
Right there. Or
If you're working on the wall 15, 16, 17, 18 hours, what are you not doing? Working in the fields, working in your shop, doing what you normally do to make money. So that became a problem. Also, the bills didn't go away. You still were working up there, but you still had the bills. In chapter 5, 14 to 18, we see Nehemiah setting the example of feeding many people in his own home. But then he starts to dig up some problems. The problem, basically, you had a group who owned no land. They maybe went back with him. But you had a group that owned no land, i.e. common laborers. You had a second group that owned land, and there was a looming problem that they couldn't repay their loans. And you had a third group who owned land, but their problem was not having the money to pay their taxes. So who does Nehemiah confront? The bankers. He confronts those who are giving loans and those who are reeling their loans in, increasing the percentage on loans and using these people that are trying to do something good for God, trying to use them. It said that the debtors were considering selling their kids into debt slavery. That loans on pledges and debts, putting yourself in slavery was not illegal, according to the Old Testament, but that it caused, of course, a great hardship on a family. And so, in verses 6 and 7, he'll start to contend with the leaders there in the province, and basically wins his argument, wins them over, to where they agree that they will not increase the percentage on the loans, that they will not, so to speak, throw people into debtor's prison or slavery, etc., etc. Why? Because, now we're into, 52 days, this is a 2-month kind of a thing, but most of these people did not have a lot to work with to begin with.
That's another evidence of Nehemiah's incredible leadership capabilities, because he was dealing with both sides, trying to keep that finely balanced. So people who haves and have-nots, he's having to create neutrality to accomplish his goal, which is to rebuild the wall.
Yeah.
He modeled that too, because he had 150 people that were eating at his table. Accounting for that was not, those were coming from where he came from. I mean, the substance wasn't a burden on the people in the immediate region.
Yeah, so 150 people, so he's probably saying, by example, hey, I'm doing my share, I want you to do your share, whatever that should be. If it's simply helping a person on a loan, or forgiving the percentage or the payment for a few months or whatever, let's kind of think creatively here and accomplish this thing for God. Now, something else in this chapter that we just covered, chapter 4. How do the Samaritans cross the line? How do the Samaritans cross the line? What did we learn last night about the project? Even when it got kind of long and mundane with this guy was here and this guy was there, and what was the second thing that we saw? The first thing was the high priest Eliashib and the priest building. The next thing they do is what? Starts with a D. Next is E. They dedicated the work. So all of a sudden, this just isn't a wall building project on some tell in the middle of no place. All of a sudden, this is a project that's been dedicated to God.
Reestablishing a religion where they've been a mess for hundreds of years.
And you have the Samaritans mocking what they're doing. So in reality, whether the Samaritans understand it or not, they're mocking what God is, what's been dedicated to God. And so as you go on in the book, this kind of a reoccurring issue. Why, of course, are they taking up arms? Why are they protecting themselves? Why are they moving ahead? Why do they take the stance that they do against the Samaritans? Because this is God's work. And when you start mocking God's work, you may start entering God's shooting gallery. So you have to be very careful what you mock. And then you have another principle, you'll get into it on your own as you translate further in the book, that Haman goes out back in the book of Esther and he builds a gallows. And he ends up being the person that tests the gallows, which is an interesting application. If you ever make a gallows, be very careful. Because be careful what you make, because you may end up a part of it, but so on. Okay, we have about 20 minutes left, and I said I wanted to say a few things about word studies, and I'm not going to impinge on one of your teachers in the future, so let me just say a few things, not a lot, but that will be an important part of your Hebrew studies. And I'm going to add a few points. When you come to a term, Hebrew term, you are looking for a number of things. You do your word study and you are looking for potential meanings. Okay? You are looking for potential meanings. Potentially, this term, this word, when used, can mean this. Potentially, it can mean this or this. The question is, which one of the potential usages is the author using, whether it's spoken form or written form? That is different from real meaning.
Etymological meaning.
Real meaning is a word used in a context that can be discerned. So you look it up, you don't know which one is being used. Let's say, just for a point of example, let's say the term has 4 potential meanings in BDB. You note all those. But then as you go to the context, which does it appear that the author is using? You may find from looking that it's potential meaning number 3, whatever that is. But take a look at all the passages where the term is used. And of course today with different programs and whatever, but even if you don't have those, it's pretty easy to do. Just track them. And read enough of the context to where you know what is being said and so on. Now, I don't know if I mentioned, but every time they come out with the the dictionary, Webster's Exhaustive Dictionary, did you know that there is a word graveyard? Did we talk about this? That experts on the English language research and determine when a word has gone out of use long enough till basically nobody knows it and uses it, and they get rid of it. And they start tossing words out of the dictionary because they're useless. Nobody uses them anymore. So that does go on. Every time the new dictionary comes out, in one sense, there's fewer words. In another sense, the book keeps getting bigger. Why? Because we keep taking on and acquiring a whole lot more words than we're losing. And so, sure enough, the exhaustive keeps getting bigger and bigger, but there is a determination, too, of when words simply are not understood anymore to the point where nobody is using them in their communication.
Do they document the words that hit the graveyard?
I don't think they do in it, but you could probably, if you wrote, they would probably send you a list back and say, these are the graveyard words that didn't make the cut. Now, what often happens with ancient Near Eastern terms, here Hebrew for specific illustration, Aleph, Mem, final Nun, Aman. We've had forms of this in our little short stories. Remember, they believed in idols, or they don't believe you're God. That's the idea. Confirm, support what is true, faithful, what is strong. And from this term, we get the most transliterated term in the world. Amen. It's used in just about every language simply as amen and not something else worldwide. But notice in modern Hebrew how it spins off, even down to faith, belief, faithful, true, verified, the right hand, the skilled workman, the artist, today in modern Hebrew, the foster father, and train. And some of them you can see how one thing leads to another and why it's there. Others you kind of struggle with, why would it have that potential meaning? It doesn't seem to be that closely related to the others, but perhaps you dig into the culture and you understand more how it's used and you could see that connection. Now, you have terms that are related to cognates. Use another color here. Related to cognates. And what you had in the ancient Near East, you have three large families. When it comes to Semitic languages, you have three large families. Just picture the Tigris and Euphrates and Israel over here. You had what was called East Semitic by scholars. And you had a city called Akkad in history, and the tablets that have been found there, the language is called Akkadian. I had to take 2 courses in Akkadian in my doctoral studies. And it's the wedge cuneiform writing. But it's Semitic. And from Akkadian, you got Assyrian, and from Assyrian, Babylonian. So all of those are East Semitic. They have their unique features. And also kind of on the line is Ebelah, or the Ebelite tablets. Another language. Okay, then you have what's called Northwest Semitic. Northwest Semitic has 2 big branches. The Canaanite languages and the Aramaic languages, Aramaic branch. The Canaanite has many. It has Moabite, Edomite, Ammonite, Ugaritic, which is actually Canaanite, Hebrew, and then you have different forms of the Aramaic. Then you have what is called South-Semitic. South-Semitic, of course, Arabic. Other types even down to Ethiopic. Now, often a term will be used in the Hebrew Bible, but if it happens to be a hapax legomena, what's that? One-time use. In other words, you open up to Nehemiah, you have a term, you look, and why word in the Bible? There's only one occurrence. It's in Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 6, and wow. And then it may be questionable on the meaning. Well, it might mean this, might mean that, might mean something else. One way to start dealing with it is to look, is it being used in different cognate languages? Because it might not have a heavy use in Hebrew, but it may show up in Ugaritic or Edomite and used several times in some tablets. Not to say it's going to be one for one, but it may show you, based on your context, much closer what the meaning was. So let me.
When you say one for one, you mean a meaning? When you say one for one, you mean correct meaning?
It may not be one for one. In other words, let's say, where I live, where I grew up was 1 mile from Canada. There was a river between us. So my town, river, town in Ontario. If you listen to Canadian radio, they would. It was a small town area, so they would actually in the late afternoon they would announce who had gone into hospital today, and they would say something like, in Brigton, Mr. Smith went to hospital today. And that kind of stood out. Went to hospital. We would say went to the hospital or was admitted to the hospital, and they wouldn't put the definite article. So-and-so is in hospital. And so there's only a river. You can see him over there walking around. There's only a river, but there's differences in simply how you speak English. And but it's things like that to where they're close enough to where the hospital or hospital, you can communicate the same thing. Or the term here, the term there may have some different nuances, but you know the ballpark, so to speak. Now, let me take this off so I can put a transparency up here.
Did the Hebrew derive at the same time as Canaanite and Moabite?
You would identify what we call Hebrew with from the time of Abraham, 2000 BC onward. And so the question is, are some of these groups there before Abraham? If they're before Abraham, but you'd have Edomite, Moabite, Ammonite, all occurring developing around the same time as Hebrew. The Canaanite would be earlier. That's why Hebrew is called a Canaanite language, because it's in an area where Canaanite was predominant. In other words, when Abraham from East Semitic area comes into Canaan, how does he talk to Canaanites? How does he talk to Ephron the Hittite? How does he talk to the Philistines? There has to be a lingua franca that they all can communicate in, unless they're using translators, and there's nothing telling us that they're using translators, just kind of these open conversations going on. And I'm trying to find one. Oh, here it is. Taking a look at your prepositions. This is how your prepositions break out in your different Semitic languages. And you can see they're very, very close. Notice ba, in or by. Hebrew, it's simply the different vowel. Still the same sound, but they're all a ba sound. To, la, li, la. Like, ka, kamo, ak, ka, command, or kama, and so on. So what I'm getting at is, even though they're different languages, there's a lot of similarity. And in speaking, things may sound differently, but yet, there's closeness there. So let's say, just for an example, let's say in Hebrew, when we get down to from, min, let's say min was a rare term in the Old Testament, and you looked in Nehemiah 6, verse 6, or someplace there, and min is used, but you don't know really how it was really used, because it's only used once. I'm just using it for example. But then you look over and you say, I wonder if it's using the cognates, and sure enough, wow, in Syria, it's not min, but men, and it's used all over the place, and you can tell by studying it there, looking at your context, wow, okay, now I understand the meaning of the dynamics of that meaning and so on. So cognate's very helpful. And when you get into your word studies, in fact, that's why BDB, if you notice, right at the beginning, it lists the term, and then the whole next section are the different cognates that the word occurs in. So look at the beginning of BDB. It has a key that tells you what all those abbreviations mean, but it will tell you, does this occur in Aramaic? Does it occur in Ugaritic? Does it occur in Syriac? Does it occur in whatever? But and then it will also give you a basic range of meaning. Add to this the fact that you have idiomatic expression that at times have to be dealt with. You have figurative use. You have loan words, etc., etc., etc. A loan word from another language, cosmonaut, etc., etc. Well, let's see here.
We have loan words in English, right? I mean, every language would have loan words.
If we use cosmonaut, perestroika, those are all Russian loan words. Taco, Well, it's been good studying with you. Trust that our time together has helped move you down the right road. And the key thing is just keep reading as you pick up the rules of the game. And keep working on the vocab, and just tell yourself, this is going to be a solid part of my exegetical process for my life. It's a decision of the will. I'm going to, therefore, let's make it happen. I think we are dismissed. Those on video, Lord's blessing upon you too, and trust that you continue to move forward in your Hebrew studies of the Old Testament.